Welcome to Athens Happens. I'm Ben Peters, managing editor at The New Political. Athens Happens is a weekly news podcast brought to you by TNP reporters dedicated to explaining the nuances of Athens and state politics. You can find new episodes every Friday at thenewpolitical.com, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, or wherever else podcasts can be downloaded. This week, we're going to discuss a rally held last week by President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, where they kicked off their 2020 reelection campaign in Toledo, Ohio. Staff writer Nolan Cramer joins me to talk about what the president had to say at the rally, attendees he met at the event, and the experience of seeing Trump live as a news reporter. How are you, Nolan?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. So you went to go see Mr. Trump last week in Toledo.
Yes, I did.
What were your general impressions when you first arrived on the scene?
So this was actually my second time I've covered Trump as president. The first time was in July of 2017 when I was interning at the Blade. So I went to go see him in Youngstown.
The Toledo Blade?
Yes.
The newspaper.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So we traveled to Youngstown to cover a rally they held there. So I was expecting pretty much the same experience, but definitely now it's a little more security, quite a few more people than there were in Youngstown. And definitely the rhetoric between supporters and Trump has also increased. So more protesters also.
I see.
But basically, this preparation for the rally started weeks ahead of time, ever since he announced. I think it was just before Christmas he announced that he was going to come to Toledo. And almost right after he announced that, some news outlets started doing stories where people that would travel the country in like trailers with merchandise would then start like popping up on street corners, and they were there for like a solid week and a half before the speech, just selling merchandise. Like
Make America Great Again hats?
Yes.
And things like that?
Yeah, like everything you could imagine. And definitely like some weird unlicensed stuff, like weird sayings and a lot of stuff that was kind of homemade, and you could tell that wasn't licensed. But these people, they just travel rally to rally with their like trailers and tables, and they set up every day.
Interesting. And so the president and Vice President Pence kicked off their 2020 reelection campaign at this particular rally. Do you know why they chose to do that here? Did they mention a reason as to why?
Not specifically. Any reason they really gave to why he was going to kick off the year in Toledo really just related to Ohio and how important Ohio is for the Trump campaign to win if he wants to get reelected this year. But really not any specific reason. And all that I could think with timing was there has been the talk of impeachment going to the Senate, which originally before the new year was going to kind of be planned like last week,
right,
when he was going to be in Toledo instead of today when we're recording the podcast.
Which had happened today.
Yes. So really, that's the only thing I can really think of why that timing would be. Like usually his rallies are strategically timed in some way. Like yesterday was the 14th, and it was the same night as the Democratic debate, and he was holding a rally. So a lot of the times they are strategically planned, but there really wasn't much of a reason behind this one.
Well, this was right after the killing of the Iranian military general, right?
That's correct. So that happened like almost a week before the rally.
I see.
But then earlier in the week was when Iran launched missiles at some of the U.S. military bases.
And so I presume that those two topics, impeachment and Iran, were the two big talking points from the president. Is that accurate?
Not necessarily. It's definitely the talking points that everybody wanted the president to talk about.
I see.
But really, he kind of dodged them for at least part of the time. So the killing of General Soleimani, which was the Iranian general, he did bring it up, and he did say that Soleimani was actively planning new attacks, which was really a new piece of information. It's really, if you were looking at national media outlets, it's what they mentioned in their coverage of the rally.
Which they have since, for all intents and purposes, disproven that that's true.
Correct. But that's a lot of things. Like you'll see, I believe the Dispatch did a write-up just fact-checking the rally, and they found that there was numerous inaccuracies with the way he said.
The Columbus Dispatch?
Yes.
Okay.
Which really isn't surprising. It's something that is expected from a Trump rally now. Really, it's a lot of rhetoric to pump up supporters, and he does a very effective job of doing that. But what he said was Soleimani was actively planning new attacks, and he was looking very seriously at our embassies, and not just the embassy in Baghdad. But we stopped him quickly, and we stopped him cold. So really, the still hard-hitting rhetoric. And it wasn't really something that we heard the day previous. So the rally took place on Thursday the 9th. And right the day before, he actually held a press conference in the White House for the media, where basically he came out, and this would have been the morning right after Iran fired the missiles at the bases. And he came out with all these, big, strong military guys behind him. And really, instead of keeping this rhetoric going where he's really just screaming things about Soleimani and what he was planning, Trump kind of kept composed and said they were going to introduce new sanctions. And
during the press conference.
Yes.
Okay.
So really, I was expecting that kind of talk to continue at this rally, but no, he totally went kind of off the rails when talking about Soleimani and went full out about how proud he was that the United States killed him and about how bad of a guy he was.
And so if the Iranian crisis and impeachment weren't really the primary topics of discussion, what were then?
He liked to talk a lot about the economy.
Okay.
I feel like it really has to appeal to where he was speaking. So Toledo is my hometown, and it's always kind of had this, it's always been this kind of rundown industrial town, and it's really trying to revitalize itself, but it relies a lot on union workers and a lot of middle class workers. And to those voters, the economy matters a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't necessarily care too much about what's happening overseas. They really care about what the president's going to do for them and how his policies are going to impact them. So really, he talked about trade a lot, and he talked about how bad NAFTA was and this new USMCA that they're working on getting passed through Congress right now. But on that same note, he kind of went off on this weird tangent about tractors, which was, when I was talking to other reporters after the rally, this was kind of the thing that we brought up because it was kind of goofy.
Okay.
It really didn't fit in anywhere else. But the first thing, it was like within the first 3 minutes of his speech after he came out, his quote was, "I keep saying, go buy larger tractors, go buy larger tractors." And he said he told that to the farmers because really, so Toledo is surrounded by a lot of rural area where there's a lot of farmers. And a lot of them have been hit hard by sanctions recently against China in this trade war. So he was really trying to appeal to that and make it sound like he was super knowledgeable on tractors. And then he said he looked at some of the hydraulic tractors and he loved the whole thing, the world of tractors and all that stuff.
And he said this?
Yes.
Why big tractors? Just to be more efficient, to farm more efficiently?
He kept going on about the tractors, and at some point he said something like, "I didn't know there could be larger tractors."
Okay.
But apparently he wants all the farmers to go buy larger tractors.
So were there any other big sticking points of Trump's presence at the event himself?
Not necessarily. It was a lot of the same things. He spoke for an hour and a half. It was a really long speech. So he just tried to hit every topic he could that you've heard through the last 3-4 years. So he did talk briefly about impeachment. Like I said, it wasn't a big talking point. He called it the impeachment hoax. And then he called Nancy Pelosi Nervous Nancy. He has nicknames for everyone. But really not much more than that. Besides, he didn't do too much political attacking either. I mean, he brought up the other Democrat candidates quite a bit. And he mentioned the debates. He said, "I tried to watch the competition, but it's like watching death. Those debates are boring. You got to sit through those things for 2 or 3 hours. You really got to be committed to this country to do that." So he's definitely not watching the Democratic debates, and he bashed them and wanted to say about how he said that when he was running, he was always at the center of the stage and number one, and how he's polling so much better than all the Democrat candidates. It's really just a lot of that political rhetoric, the kind of stuff that really any politician or candidate is going to say about their competition in order to try to win.
So what about Vice President Mike Pence? What did he have to say?
So Pence spoke really briefly for about 15 minutes and really just touched on a lot of these same points. He talked about how he didn't like this impeachment business. And
were there any other major political figures in attendance there?
Lieutenant Governor Husted.
John Husted?
Yes. He was there. He actually was on the tarmac when Vice President Pence arrived, because Pence and Trump arrived at different times at the airport. So he was actually on the tarmac, and then he rode with Pence. They made one stop at a local diner in Toledo before they went to the Huntington Center where the rally was being held. He kind of traveled around with them, but he didn't speak. But Trump did give the lieutenant governor like a shout out in his speech and started thanking any politicians that were in attendance, from city politicians to state to federal.
So let's talk a little bit about the people in attendance at this rally. What was the energy of the crowd like?
So really, the energy of the crowd is, you really can't understand it unless if you're there.
Okay.
These people love the president. Like you wouldn't believe. They come dressed up in suits that look like the American flag. They have all different kinds of Trump merch. Some of them make their own shirts, and they'll wait outside to get in for hours, if not days. They were lined up over 24 hours before the speech was scheduled to start, just to get into the door so they could be close to the stage. But then by the time that they opened, they were predicting that they would have 1,000 people in line. So they had like a queue set up that could hold 1,000 people, and then that overflowed, and they were lined up blocks just to get in.
Oh, wow.
So the doors opened at 3, and then the rally was scheduled to start at 7. But by the time that 4 p.m. hit, they had to close off the line because the arena was already nearing capacity.
So do people buy tickets for these, or do they just line up at the door and first come, first served?
So this is actually kind of an interesting point, because it led to a lot of confusion for supporters that were going to attend the rally. So the Trump campaign on their website, whenever they're announcing a rally, will open up like an RSVP link. So people can go on and they get like 2 tickets per phone number or something. They go on, they fill out all their information, and they get like a ticket. Has like a little QR code that they scan when they're going in. But that ticket does not guarantee you a spot in the rally. So people had to not only RSVP, but then also stand in line early if they wanted to actually get in. So really, I think that just has to do with, obviously the Trump campaign, they're not going to just like turn off RSVP as soon as they hit like how many ever tickets the arena will hold. They want to get as many people as they can out there. But really led to some confusion, because a lot of people thought that if they had a ticket that they were guaranteed a spot inside, which they weren't.
I don't think I asked you this, but what arena was this in?
It was in the Huntington Center. It's where our minor league hockey team plays.
I see.
It's a good size. It holds usually 8,000, but from what I heard, they actually packed at 1,000 over capacity. That's what I heard from the fire marshal that was there. They said they were going to allow 9,000 in. So pretty good sized arena. And then there was an overflow crowd that was outside on Huron Street, directly outside the arena, where the Trump campaign set up a giant video board where people could stand outside then and watch the president's speech.
So did you actually get a chance to talk with any of these supporters who were in attendance?
I did. So I just kind of walked through the line and looked for people who seemed like they'd be an interesting person to talk to. And one person I talked to traveled from Port Huron, Michigan, which is a couple hours north of Toledo, just to come down and see the president speak. And the one question that I asked most of them was that if you were the president's speechwriter and you wanted to make sure one topic was talked about during the night's rally, what would you want to see talked about the most, and then what would you want to see talked about the least? Or what do you think the president should focus on in his speech? I figured it was just a good overall question to kind of get people talking, and they'll all share their opinion on how they think he's doing and it's a good way for people to share their political opinions.
Sure.
It's instead of just saying, what's your opinion on Iran? Or a lot of people kind of get turned off by that upfront directness like that. So this guy was named Zach Smith from Port Huron, And he talked about how he thought he was doing a really good job, like worldwide. And he said he was super impressed with how the president was doing and really impressed about how he could get along with countries like North Korea. And he said even like Iran, he felt like the president did a good job with that whole situation.
So he praised the president's foreign policy.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And then Taylor Frent, he was from Waterville. He was another supporter there.
Where's Waterville?
That's about 15 minutes southwest of Toledo.
So it's in Ohio.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So not very far. It's right along the Maumee River.
Mm.
So he was all dressed up in head to toe American flag, a suit, had a cowboy hat on. And so everybody kind of wanted to talk to him. He was very popular among the crowd and among journalists to kind of see what his views were, why he came out, and why he was dressed like that. And so I just asked him about the job that he thought the president was doing. And he said that he loves everything that Trump is doing and that he tried to make it to a rally last year but couldn't. And he said he really just wanted to come out to this rally to support the president and show his support. And that was really the main, what everybody was kind of saying among the supporters. They all really want to come show their support. And for them, this is like going and seeing like a rock concert. Like it's a huge, the Trump campaign puts on a huge spectacle. And his supporters all know that and come out for these. They're basically shows rather than a traditional political rally.
Yeah. So the picture you've painted of a lot of these attendees are kind of, loud, boisterous, colorful people. Were there any more quaint, quiet attendees who, were minding their own business, maybe there with a friend or a significant other?
Yeah, you really saw some attendees that you'd say were more moderate in the political spectrum and really just came out to see what the president was going to say and really didn't care too much for his current policy, but really it was the opportunity to come see a president. I mean, that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not every day that the president is in a town close to you. So they came out just to come see him speak. And a lot of them felt like to be an informed voter come November of 2020, that they really needed to see both sides and get to as many rallies as they could and hear everybody's own side actually from them. Because even among people who were moderates, there's still kind of this distrust in the media and how we may portray Trump or any other candidate. So they really like to go to rallies themselves and hear what they have to say.
That's super interesting. Did you speak with any of these more moderate attendees?
I did, and a lot of them just said that basically, that they were here because the president was here and that's who they wanted. They just wanted to hear what he had to say.
Okay. So I understand that there were protests outside of the event. What was that like?
So starting right about when I got there about 1:30, and once again, doors were going to open at 3 and the event 7. There was already a small group of protesters that were assembling. They were all union protesters. They all had signs that were from the IBEW, which is their National Brotherhood of Electrical Workers.
Okay.
But when I spoke to them, they all weren't from the IBEW. They all came from different unions and were there as a group to protest union busting.
I see.
But it started off pretty small. It was about 20 of them to start. And then the closer we got to doors opening, that crowd just kept growing. And it started growing with other groups. And while I was expecting it to be kind of like what we saw in Westerville when I covered the Democratic debate, and each group protesting kind of stuck to their own area. So you had like groups that'd be a couple dozen people scattered around. All the protesters just kind of assembled in one large group, no matter what their cause was, to protest the president. So this group just kept growing and growing.
And so these were just a bunch of different factions, disparate factions, coalescing into one
big group. It was really kind of unique to see, but it made for a really large protest crowd by the time the rally started. And so when I talked to some of the protesters before the rally, it was still pretty calm. I mean, of course you had people with like bullhorns and people trying to make noise and be loud, but really there was no incidents between any of the supporters and any of the protesters. But as soon as I went inside to the arena, one of the reporters from The Blade there in Toledo, Brooke Sutherland, they capture and post on Twitter, and it's actually linked in the article on TNP's website's embedded in there, where there was just some supporters were trying to cause trouble. It was almost, in this case, it was a supporter who went up to the protesters and kind of tried to provoke. It was nothing physical, but they went up there and just started yelling at each other. And luckily, police were there and separated the two. But surprisingly, police presence, usually when you see a lot of these rallies, you'll see officers that are in like riot gear. But surprisingly, the officers in Toledo weren't. I mean, they were just in their everyday uniforms. They had batons, but no riot gear. So they were expecting protests to go pretty smoothly compared to how they might go in some other cities.
So were there any protesters? So you said that the attendees were provoking protesters. Were there any protesters directly provoking attendees that you saw?
That went on after the rally, because the interesting thing was they stuck us all into the arena, all the media.
Okay.
We had to be in by 4:30, so 2.5 hours before the rally started, and then as soon as we were in, we weren't allowed to leave. So while this group kept growing as it got closer to 7, no members of the media were allowed to go out there. We were kind of stuck in the arena. So what I saw was really from like the windows, because we were able to walk around the arena, just not go outside of it.
Sure.
But as soon as I walked out after the rally, there was police had set up barricades between the protesters and the supporters coming out of the rally. And we're all funneling people coming out of the rally in one direction to try to avoid contact between the two sides. So you had barricades, and then you had police that were in between the barricades to try to keep the sides separated. But really, it was just a screaming match between the two sides. So really wasn't either side provoking each other at that point, but it would be one side would scream at the other, and then that side would scream back, and they just went back and forth and back and forth. And some of the protesters had signs that the supporters didn't like. They were calling Trump a Nazi, or just yelling things about how the supporters hate America and how they're unpatriotic. And of course, that led to some people coming out of the rally then to also stop and scream back. So instead of having people moving, kind of like how the police hoped, you then had people stationary just screaming back at the protesters, and it went back and forth and back and forth.
Were there any protesters inside of the arena?
So there was one, and about halfway through Trump's speech, he was speaking about veterans' rights and VA, and about how he was really trying to help veterans' health care and not make it so veterans wouldn't have to wait hours to see a doctor at a VA hospital. And during that time, I was sitting behind some risers, so I really couldn't see too well, but Trump just stopped speaking. And then you heard people in the arena like booing. So that's when I got on my seat. And everybody was just booing at this one person who apparently was a protester. And at some point, Trump just kind of turned and watched and smiled. And they really all love this. They love when a protester erupts, because then security comes, and security came and removed this protester from the arena.
That's interesting. And so the president didn't make any statement to him. He just kind of looked at this. The
only thing they said was, as soon as they got him out of there, he said he was going home to mommy, is what the president said. And that's kind of something he said a lot. It's a rare occurrence for there not to be a protester in one of these rallies. I mean, people go in and their goal is just to cause a disturbance. Get a reaction. But the interesting thing to that is, I'm not sure if you remember, but when Trump was originally campaigning in 2016, there was an incident where one of his supporters actually punched a protester in one of his rallies. And ever since then, there's been this announcement that plays outside in the lines before they let the doors open. And so they tell everybody that's attending the rally that if they see a protester or demonstrator inside, that they're all supposed to take like now they have Keep America Great Again signs and any of their campaign signs, and hold them over their head or point at them and start cheering Trump, Trump, Trump until somebody notices it and security comes and removes them from the premises.
So they're actively encouraging attendees to remove.
Yes, to call these people out if they see them.
Wow. And was this like a pre-recorded thing that was being
Yeah,
played?
it's a pre-recorded thing. I heard it at the last rally I attended, and I heard at this one too, but they were playing it on loudspeakers outside the queue, along with, all the other safety messages about what was permitted to go into the arena and what wasn't.
Interesting.
And they played that.
So you've mentioned quite a few interesting bits that I've never heard of. I've never attended a Trump rally. So this is super interesting to me. But is there any one particular thing that you think somebody who has never personally attended a Trump rally would find fascinating about these events?
I think it's just the amount of support. So I've attended political rallies when it was 2016 for many candidates, but none of them are like a Trump rally. I mean, really the way that he hypes these people up and they love it. It's like before the rally, they're just blasting loud music and people are dancing, and they did the YMCA beforehand and people are they all have a good time. They make a day out of it. People really enjoy going to these rallies, and they enjoy meeting these people that have similar views to them. And it's crazy, especially as soon as rally time comes and Trump starts speaking and they say something they really likes. Just the noise from all the cheering, it's deafening. It's really a unique thing to see. It's not something that's easily portrayed when you'd watch like a YouTube video or him on television.
Sure.
You just don't hear how loud this crowd is.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to end it off. Thank you very much, Mr. Nolan Cramer.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. And that wraps it up here on Athens Happens. Make sure to tune in every Friday for new episodes that shed light on the politics that impact all of our lives. Remember, you can find the show on the New Political's website, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and on YouTube in a video podcast format. Also, be sure to check out our website at thenewpolitical.com, where we regularly report stories on what really happens here in Athens, and follow @thenewpolitical on social media. Thank you all so much. Have a great week.